part 2 of chapter 1. In addition to IDEA and No Child Left Behind, another law that governs special education practice is the Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973, specifically Section 504 of that act. So you'll hear it referred to in special ed textbooks and other literature just as Section 504. What it is, it's a non-discriminatory act, and so what it does is it says that any private organization that uses federal funds or any public agency that it receives federal funds can't discriminate against people because of disabilities. There are two kinds of accessibility that Section 504 guarantees. One is what we call physical accessibility. So that's why you have the wheelchair ramps, that's why you have the wide doors, the lowered water fountains, the accessible restrooms, the handicap parking places. All of those have to do with physical accessibility. But what 504 says is the only reason you have to have physical accessibility is so that you can have programmatic accessibility. So the way that works is that at Delta State, there are actually some buildings that don't have elevators. An example of that is Bailey has no elevators. Somebody told me recently that they put one in now, but for a long time they didn't. You'll have to check me on that as to whether there actually is one. But the point is that the reason Bailey didn't have to have an elevator was there was nothing on second floor Bailey that couldn't be moved. So that, for instance, if we had a history class that was being taught on second floor of Bailey, then all we had to do if we had a student with a wheelchair is move that classroom to Walters Kaler or to Ewing or to any of the other buildings that had an elevator. So accessibility is for the program or for the activity. The physical accessibility is just so that that can happen. An example of this was there was a business that had received federal money on a grant, and so they had someone say they needed to lower the water fountains for people in wheelchairs, and they said, boy, that's going to be awfully expensive. And the solution they came up with is they put a cup holder next to the water fountain, and so the person could actually access the water by getting a cup rather than having to get their mouth up to the water. So it's physical accessibility only so you can have programmatic accessibility. And so it prohibits discrimination in education, employment, social and health services, and it's designed to make sure that people have the opportunity to be trained for jobs. That's the education part. And then also to be employed. Section 503 has to do with employment. Section 504 has to do with just general accessibility. Another concept that we look at is least restrictive environment. Now, this is going back to not only 504, but also to IDEA and also to No Child Left Behind. The idea of least restrictive environment is that children have to be given the opportunity to have their education in the place where there are the least amount of restrictions, but they still can benefit from an education. So the continuum of services that this talks about says that if all things are equal, we want them in the general ed classroom with consultation, where they're not getting any special ed services at all directly, but there's someone who is consulting with the teacher to help the teacher do a better job in differentiating instruction. If that doesn't work, then we can have part-time placements in special education so that we can pull them out an hour or so a day or an hour or so a week to receive the services that they need. More restrictive than that would be full-time in special ed, where they're in special ed all day or most of the day. More restrictive than that would be a separate school, day school, like the School for the Deaf in Jackson is an example of a day school where everybody that goes to that school has a disability. They are all deaf. Or residential schools. We have Ellisville State School. We have North Mississippi Regional Center has a school. South Mississippi Regional Center has a school. And then homebound or hospital instruction is the most restrictive of all settings. IEP. Now, this is going back to IDEA. What an IEP is an individualized education program. So if a child is receiving special education services, we have to have a plan that says what it is we're doing differently for that child than we do for other children. And this is to guarantee that FAPE that I talked about before. There is a multidisciplinary team that develops the IEP, implements and monitors the implementation of that. So here are the things that are going to be in an IEP. The first thing is the student's present level performance. So what we have to say is, right now, what are this child's strengths? What are the things he's good at? What are the things he has mastered? What are the things, where is he in the general ed curriculum? That's what we're saying in present level performance. Then we have to have annual goals that are tied to the child's present level performance. If the child has a severe disability, we also have to have short-term objectives. We have to say what special ed services he's going to receive and what related services. And related services could be things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, transportation, counseling, mobility, nutrition. All of those would be related services. Explanation to the extent that the child will not participate with non-disabled peers. The IEP used to have that backwards. We used to have to say to what extent he would be with non-disabled peers. Now we have to say what extent he won't be. And any time of the day that he is not with non-disabled peers, we got to say why. Individual modifications to statewide and district assessments. The projected beginning and end of the services we're going to give him and the modifications, how we're going to measure progress for the child, at least as often as we measure progress for other children. So every time that a report card goes out, we also have to give an update on IEP goals. Methods that we're going to inform children of progress toward annual goals. And then we have to have a transition plan to transition him from school to either post-secondary, like community college or college, or to the world of work, or to a community setting. Here are the people that have to be in an IEP meeting. We have to have somebody representing the local education agency. That can be the school principal, or it can be the special ed director, but it has to be somebody that says, yes, we will provide that service. A school representative other than the teacher. We have to have a parent or guardian have to be allowed to participate. The student, if he's old enough, the student's general or special ed teacher, somebody who can interpret the assessment results, and anybody else that the school or parents think can help develop this IEP because of special expertise or special knowledge. When we are trying to decide if a child's going to be in special education, receive special ed services, then we have some processes. This is the due process we talked about earlier. There's response to intervention. We're going to do a whole chapter on that. Pre-referral teams. And what they do is they give suggestions to the classroom teacher. They talk about how to accommodate academic and behavioral needs. These teams reduce the need for referral to special ed. After these teams were put in place, within a 5-year period, the number of kids in special ed went down from about 11% to about 7% of all public school children. And then they also, these teams are going to assist the teacher if the child does need to be referred. And we're going to look at these models later. IDEA has been expanded to give services to toddlers from birth to 5 and to have transition services. So when IDEA was first passed, it was just 5 to 18, and now it is birth to 21. On that bottom end, the early intervention, we have, instead of an IEP, we have what's called an IFSP, Individualized Family Service Plan, because under the age of 3, you're with your parents all the time. You're not going out on the town on your own. Then the plan has to do with the needs of the family as well as the child. And so it can include psychological assessment, occupational physical therapy, speech, language, audiology, home visits, specialized training for the parent, case management, health services. It has to look across the developmental domains, so that's language, motor, social, academic. It assesses the family. It has goals for the child, procedures for measuring progress, the description of the natural settings where we're going to do the instruction. Most early intervention programs are done in the child's home. When the services will begin and end, who the case manager is, and then the transition plan from the birth to 3 services into the school-based services. On the 16 to 21 end, we're going to look at post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing in adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. Okay, so that is all of chapter 1, and you're saying, well, thank goodness for that. So that's all we got to know about